Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 9 of the Know Your Brain podcast, where we learn how to know your brain for a bountiful life. I'm here today with registered social worker and registered psychotherapist, Stacey Sanderson, and we're going to talk about her book, Heart Wide Open, a holistic guide to self-recovery from narcissistic wounds. So all of us who have known a narcissist, which is all of us, would benefit from learning about how to recover from narcissistic wounding because they're out there and they're interesting people to meet. So I just want to say that I have an extra copy of Stacey's book, and I will be giving away one copy of the book. And if you watch later on in the episode, somewhere in the middle, I'm going to tell you how to get your free copy of the book, and I will mail it to you. So by Canada Post. So please keep listening. Don't miss anything because you'll miss out on how to get a free book. I'm giving away one book to one person. So, Stacey, let's just start. I'm so happy that you're here today.
Me
Being,
too.
yeah, thank you for being generous with your time, writing the book and being here. So, start by telling us about your background and how you got into this work.
Okay, so my background is for many years, I was a social worker working in medicine. So I worked in a community-based setting, hospital setting, and more recently, a family health team, which is an Ontario phenomenon. But began working as a social worker and then changed my scope of practice a little bit to psychotherapy. So my background is largely about seeing people in the context of a more medical issue or a more health-based issue. And as I mentioned before, and when we were chatting before, early on, as I was seeing people in therapy for anxiety, depression, complex chronic illness, before we really understood it, I started mapping patterns of their early attachment styles and history with their current ways of relating to people, managing stress, and understanding what made them vulnerable to this complex chronic illness. So it's a little bit of a different way of approaching it than, for someone who's had lived experience in narcissistic abuse and then writes about it from that perspective. And what came from that was observing that the typical therapy formats, cognitive behavioral therapy, solution focused practice, that those weren't a good fit for these people.
Okay.
Because it was more of a complex trauma presentation. Now, this was well before people were reading Gabor Mate. This was before people were reading Bessel van der Kolk's work. And so I came in to learn, more trauma informed ways of helping people after mapping some of these patterns. So it just creates a slightly different way of helping people. And recognizing that these are people who've been labeled as being quote unquote crazy,
Mm-hmm.
and then they come into the medical mental health system and are treated the same way. They're re-traumatized, if you will. So I
Yeah.
wanted to create something that was more holistic and more empowering.
So, kind of what I hear you saying is that people are coming in for care either to the hospital or to a private
Yes.
practitioner with a fairly severe physical or mental illness,
Hmm.
labeled in a different way. And what you were saying is actually a lot of people fell under the umbrella of trauma.
Yes.
And like they weren't maybe, I don't know what diagnoses they were getting. They maybe that wasn't the best umbrella to put them under or label. And if you really looked at their history, what they had in common was some kind of abuse.
Yes.
Okay.
And also, I'm going to get a little personality geeky here. These are also people who are highly sensitive, highly empathic. Their nervous systems are easily dysregulated by other people and other
Okay.
people's energy and body language. I see a lot of people who were who were assessed and found to be gifted as children. I have a lot of that in the practice as well. So, and it's more common knowledge now that these types of folks with this personality cluster attract people with personality pathology. So that was another pattern. I didn't start studying personality pathology until 2007, 2008, and I really immersed myself in that for a couple of years.
The title of your book is Heart Wide Open. Why is it heart wide open? What does that mean?
Yeah. So you've met my friend Brenda Whiteman. You interviewed her as well, and I was speaking with her when this idea landed, actually. Um, what I kept thinking about is how so many people, when they experience complex trauma, they contract their body around their heart and they shut their heart down and they intellectualize, right? No one researches narcissism quite as much as someone who's trying to figure it out. And they become quite stuck in looking for that cognitive validation that it isn't them, and they become, as I say, experts on narcissism, but they're neglecting their heart energy. They're neglecting that wisdom, that true self wisdom that lives in the heart. And after the book was published, I probably could have written two other chapters on that. I
Yeah.
didn't, but I could have. But looking at heart-based wisdom, and I wanted something that was simple, right? Because the rest of it isn't so simple. I wanted something that also had
Heart wide
that
open.
more almost Buddhist type of language,
It
right?
sounds like you've met a lot of clients who are hyper rational and they're
Yes,
getting right into the thoughts of it and the details of it and the theory of it, but you kind of wanted them to drop more into their heart space and their physical
yes,
body and that part of their consciousness.
yes,
And which is hard because that's where then all the feelings come up and the memories, right? They're going to get
yes,
flooded with emotion. So, as much as it's good to understand things on an intellectual level, because that gives you something like an ability to articulate it and maybe to intervene, at some point you want to come back into your center, into your heart. Yeah.
yes,
And that's maybe where healing occurs when you drop down into the feelings. But wow, what an ocean.
yes. And to then work with that heart wisdom with self-inquiry, right? To be able to recover from, being questioned and doubted and having people make you doubt yourself by really operating from that true self wisdom, right? Who we were before people made us doubt ourselves and question ourselves.
So your clients, I mean, you were talking about they experienced narcissistic wounding. So let's just talk about for a second, what is a narcissist? What is narcissism? What's the definition?
Yes, I think that there are a number of different definitions. The ones that people use and what you will see the most often in a typical internet search is the definition that's in the American Psychiatric Association Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is a helpful tool if you're a mental health professional, particularly if you're a psychiatrist. So the personality disorders are labeled as such because they complicate treatment for other problems, notably depression or anxiety or trauma. But the reference to the DSM for our own personal lives is not helpful, not salient to most people's experiences, and really lead to a lot of confusion and self doubt. What's in the DSM isn't a full caricaturological, I think I almost said that,
Okay.
picture, right? It's written about what's relevant for diagnosis or assessment.
So do you think the DSM definition is just a very extreme and narrow definition? And like it's
Yes,
more useful in our, that's fine for clinicians
yes.
um, when they're looking at it. But for the general population, how would you define a narcissist? How would you describe them?
Yes. What isn't in the definition is the fact that they are emotionally dysregulated most of the time. So they're vibrating at a fairly high level of anxiety or agitation all the time. They are internally wired to be protective of and reactionary to shame, right? So I talk about the shame vulnerability vortex, right? That is another significant thing. Relationally, that's significant. They lack core identity. They struggle with or neurobiologically don't have the capacity for empathy, self-awareness. They operate by modalities of competition and comparison. Some have delusions of grandeur and are very grandiose. Some are more vulnerable, because I do not like the word covert. Some are more vulnerable and have this very painful inner experience of shame. They are interpersonally transactional and exploitive. They lack authenticity, and they can move into times of being into rage, right? They can move into times of rage. In a grandiose person, you're going to see that. With a vulnerable person, you won't see that rage. It's more repressed.
So you're talking about vulnerable narcissism and grandiose narcissism.
Yes.
I'll just jump in with my 2 cents. A couple people, I've heard them talk about narcissism in this way, and I thought it was really good. They said it's immaturity. So basically, emotionally, you're dealing with a toddler. Intellectually, they could be very bright, they could be very accomplished. Emotionally, you're dealing with a toddler.
Actually, it's about an 8 or 9 year old.
Okay, that's
So
not much better, but okay.
yeah, not much better. The
I've met a lot of 8-year-olds.
but think about how we relate to a toddler, right? We all go into a bit of protectiveness. Oh, isn't that cute, right? They're having a tantrum. We make excuses for it. We write it off. But the development of personality structure is that correlates with personality pathology is really interesting, in that it typically that borderline, like, as people don't navigate healthy narcissism and they're more vulnerable to the borderline narcissistic presentation, that happens around 8 or 9. A toddler is actually going to be more vulnerable, like through the stages of development. What doesn't get navigated is the whole schizoid presentation.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's nice to say that they're like toddlers and they look like toddlers. And I've seen that. But it's actually, and I would say most narcissistic parents start rejecting their children when they're around 8, 9, 10.
Okay, why do you think that is?
It's an attachment rupture because it is the beginning of independent thinking.
Oh, and they don't like it.
Yes.
Okay.
They
So they
change, children change as being those um, object constancy providers, right? They're no longer the identified love object in quite the same way. That's the only Freudian thing I will say.
so they have their
But
own mind about stuff, they have their own opinion, and
yes,
it's not so much fun for the narcissistic parent anymore.
yes.
So, yeah. And so, wow, that's rough. That they turn on an 8-year-old. Okay. So we've talked about what's narcissism. There's that grandiosity, there's an inability to process shame or to take any feedback and to alter their behavior based on that. So unfortunately, some people get into relationships with narcissists either because it's someone in their family and they were just born into it, or perhaps it's a romantic relationship later on. Um, and then they experience some sort of wounding because of that. So the people coming into your practice, typically, where do they experience this wounding?
It is probably equally from their parents and then from a romantic partner.
Okay, both. You've seen both.
Yeah, from time to time, you will have people who didn't have a narcissistic parent or parent, and they meet a partner who is. Typically, though, they've had in their childhood
Mhm.
some aspect of attachment rupture or narcissistic wounding. And then, of course, that way of relating is familiar to them, right? They're following that attachment blueprint.
Right. So, for
Hmm.
example, if I had a narcissistic father, I might be attracted to men who are somewhat like him.
Yes,
So, and then, the relationship starts, and then I'm guessing it doesn't go very well. And then, I mean, I guess there's a range of severity of what happens in these relationships, but they're not healthy relationships. And then you're
yes,
having people present with quite a high level of distress, I would think, if they're and dysfunction if they're coming in for therapy.
yes. Um, what what tends to bring people into therapy is when there's a crisis. So if there's been an extramarital affair, if the marriage is not doing so well, if there's been a rupture some way in relating, or if the person gains some insight about the relationship not meeting their needs in some way, is another common thing that I see.
What do you think the relationship is between this and actual like physical violence, like domestic abuse?
Yeah,
And please don't think I think only men are physically abusive. I know what I read was that the amount of physical aggression between men and women, it's equal. It's just that women don't cause injury. So
absolutely.
women are very because they're not strong, right, physically. Um, so women are very physically violent as well. Men are very
Yes,
physically violent. They cause more injuries. So what's the relationship between narcissism and physical abuse, do you think?
yes. There this is where I would need to refer to narcissism being on a spectrum of severity
Hmm.
with, garden variety narcissistic personality disorder at one end and sociopathy, psychopathy, at the far
Yeah.
ends of the spectrum. That plays a role in the physical violence. The further you go along that spectrum, the more someone who's abusive is deliberately weaponizing trauma and using physical abuse as a tool for coercive control.
So it's like premeditated.
Yes, it feeds into the intermittent reinforcement idea,
Mhm.
right? If you do what I want, I'll show you love. If you don't, I'm going to withdraw that love. If I'm dysregulated enough, I'm going to hit you. The other thing I have to add there is the significant correlation between narcissism and substance use, right?
Oh,
Substance
that's a good
dependence.
point.
Right. So if you have someone who is, in a narcissistic rage, and they're also impaired, then the rates of impulsivity go
Yeah,
up. The inability to
yeah,
regulate that rage
yeah.
goes up. And then factor in that they can't understand that there are consequences for actions, or they think that they're above those consequences for their
Um,
actions, that the rules don't apply for them to them.
yeah, the
What I
correlation,
hear the
yeah.
Yeah, what I hear the most commonly is the person with the character pathology becoming flooded with rage and losing control of their behavior, right? And they can be incredibly recalcitrant later, right? Like I've heard that too.
Okay.
But
Uh,
I get in trouble for saying this. Not all abusers are narcissistic.
okay. That's,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure there's lots of things going on with lots of different families, and not everybody fits under one clear category, right?
Yes.
So there can be different factors and stuff. So you in your book say there are five, or on your website as well, say there are 5 steps to healing. Can you talk about the 5 steps of healing?
Yeah, I think that the first one is self-awareness, right? So it begins there. You notice that something is off. And then what goes along with that is seeking information.
Okay.
Then the next part, this is kind of a circle. The next part is recognizing that attachment blueprint, those patterns that perhaps you're
Mhm.
repeating.
Mm-hmm.
right? Looking at your own history, taking that deep dive. So you're decentering from focusing on the other person. That's key, right? That kind of overrides everything I'm saying. The
Okay.
next part is building boundaries out of a value base that makes sense to you. So you're not building boundaries, I call these FU boundaries, like you're not building
Mhm.
boundaries in reaction to the other person. You're building boundaries based on what you need, what's important to you, and what allows for self-preservation, right? So I'm kind of somewhere in between 3 and 4 as I'm going through the list. The other
Mhm.
part of this is learning your own self-regulation. This is where I talk about compassionate detachment, a little bit more about using self-inquiry and really taking care of yourself energetically around toxic people. And then the last step is, really truly stepping into your authenticity, your power, your sovereignty as an individual. These all kind of interconnect. And as I said, it brings you right back in that circle, back to self-awareness. But where
Mm.
people get stuck is on trying to understand the other person and understanding narcissism. People get stuck there.
Oh, they just keep going in a circle. Like they keep focusing on it and focusing on it and focusing on it. Like, why did John do this? Why did John do
Yes.
this? And could I have done something different, or could John have done something different, or how can we like
And
fix John, or what's going
in
on, or
the
why did this happen, or
Yeah, I wrote a whole chapter about something I call codependent control, which is where people will genuinely believe that if they just fix themselves, the other person is going to be okay.
okay.
I I see that over and over and over again, right?
So like if I was thinner, or if I worked harder, if I was nicer to
Yes,
him, if
yes,
I had more sex with him, if I
yes,
didn't interrupt him, he it's like somehow it's my fault.
yes,
Like self, okay, all right.
yeah.
That's so interesting. So, so they're doing that. How do you get them out of that?
It's first a lot of, and this is a little bit more coaching than therapy, where you're
Yeah,
getting people to bring that attention back to themselves instead of on the narcissist, right? So it's a lot
right.
of redirecting, a lot of creating this map of self-coherence. Coherence is one of my favorite words, but like creating this idea that it's safe for people to come and center back on themselves, right?
Yeah.
That it's okay to consider the fact that you may be all right. It's the other person who has the pathology.
Kind of the idea I have in my mind is that is a strategy they used in childhood that worked to a degree. They survived. So say their mother
Oh,
was very
yes,
abusive or difficult. Okay, so I will just bend myself and conform to it and do what she says so she won't hit me, right?
you got it.
Or and then it kind of works, like you got hit less or not at all, right? So then you are with John and you're like, okay, well, what do I have to do here? Okay, I'll just be more quiet, or I'll just, do the dishes faster, or I'll do his laundry, or I'll, whatever, like I'll please him. And then you did that with your mom and that helped like somewhat.
A lot
And
of people who have parents as narcissists, partners as narcissists, this is so interesting to me. They're told to go to therapy because they're the quote unquote crazy one,
oh God.
right? So in narcissistic family systems, there will often be what we call the identified patient, right?
Right.
The child that is deemed as having something wrong with them. They're the container for all of the family's pathology. And in our adult relationships, even if it's with a friend or a sibling or a partner, they will say, there's something wrong with you. You're crazy. You have mental health issues. And then send someone off to therapy. And if you don't have a skilled therapist, they're going to also buy into, that pathologization of normal human emotion. If you're around someone who's constantly negative or unpredictable, of course you're going to develop anxiety or depression, But it's not because of necessarily because something is wrong with you or you have a natural proclivity toward that, right? It's a natural human response.
Because of your environment, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I guess that happens a lot. A lot of people, I was going to say women, but men and women go to therapy. A lot of clients present to therapy. They're anxious. They can't sleep. They can't eat. They're having nightmares that, they're having trouble. And it doesn't even occur to them. It's just because, their spouse is a monster, right? Like maybe running around having affairs or spending the money or gambling or, you know, uh, doing whatever. They're taking drugs, drinking. Like that doesn't even like they think that they have an anxiety disorder. They're not. They don't. They are married to an alcoholic.
Yes.
Like, yeah. So, uh, you should be anxious if you're married to an alcoholic. I mean, he drives home drunk once a week, right? Like, that's not safe. So wow, that's interesting to me that there's so much self-blame and they're not looking at the whole system, and saying, no, you're mistreating me, right? Because
Especially
they're
scapegoats.
so used to being mistreated.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
especially
go ahead.
people who had the scapegoat role in their family. They are way more vulnerable to this.
What's a scapegoat role? What is that?
So in a narcissistic or toxic family system, this is also true in families where there's alcoholism. One child, usually one who's a bit smarter or a bit outspoken or who doesn't fall into some of the family roles and norms, becomes the scapegoat. They become the target for blame. Everything is their fault, right? They then also usually become the identified patient. But then as a child, you internalize a lot of blame and you will instantly go to, oh, it's my fault. It must be my fault.
Mhm.
And it can take a lot of reframing and revisiting for someone to see that it wasn't their fault. It's um, a fairly entrenched way that people can think about things.
So they think it was their fault or they're weak or they're a loser, but really their parent was maybe a psychopath or a child
Yes,
molester or an alcoholic or mentally ill person or whatever they were, right?
yes,
And they don't see it that way. That's interesting. They take so much self-blame on themselves as a matter of habit. So they did that as a
yes.
child to survive and they're still doing it. And you have to get them into looking at it in a broader context and a more useful way of looking at it. So you said one of the goals of recovery is compassionate detachment. What is compassionate detachment?
So this is something that when back many years ago, I was teaching meditation, 3 days a week. I was very blessed that was my work. But navigating the very painful narcissistic dynamics that had come to a real head in my own life while I was teaching meditation, I learned how to decenter from the toxic person, be in the moment, be mindful, hold myself in compassion, right? If you're blaming yourself all the time, you're not being kind to yourself,
Mhm.
and also extending compassion to that other person.
Mhm.
So I had done this with lots of people, but not the people that were causing me pain.
Well,
So
that's
I
hard though,
put
right?
that into practice, right?
All right. So you wanted to extend compassion to the people causing you pain. What had you been extending to them before? Were you angry with them or were you,
Probably like a mix of fear or anger,
yeah,
right? Or a need to control the situation,
yeah.
would be another way of describing it.
So what happened when you
Um,
started extending compassion and trying to bring that energy out into it? What
yes,
happened?
it doesn't have to be forgiveness unless that organically feels okay, but
Mhm.
it is about equalization of power, right? We give our power away if we're angry with someone, if we're focused on them, if we're repeating, cycles of rumination about the person, right? If, as I say, if they're living rent free in your head, right? We give our power away. So the ability of extending compassion doesn't mean that they're good people or that
Okay.
what they've done is acceptable. It gives us a higher, I'm going to just step into this a little bit. It means we're operating from a higher vibration,
Okay.
right? We're not dropping down to their lower vibrational level, but coming from a high vibration. And I learned a little bit of that listening to the Dalai Lama be interviewed about the Chinese occupation of Tibet. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you watch those early videos, you will see him do that, right? So in practice, this is you're stepping back, you're observing that person, you're waiting and predicting what their pattern is going to be. And then, you think to yourself, okay, there it is, right? I've been caught doing this, right? Where I'm observing and watching the other person without getting pulled into it, right? Without getting pulled into the manipulation, the drama, without being influenced by someone's emotional dysregulation, right? They can be in their own little drama all by themselves. We don't have to participate in that.
Mm-hmm. So the word, so just to go over it again, you're talking about compassionate detachment. I think we all know what compassion is, and I'm interested in the detachment part of it. So I don't know, I guess the image I'm having in my head is that these people are very entangled together, and you sort of need to detangle from them,
Yes.
right? I mean, you can't cut everyone out of your life necessarily, like completely. Like, for example, if you have children with somebody, you might need to deal with them occasionally
Yes.
at least. But to not feel that incredibly close, sort of enmeshed feeling when you see them and all your emotions jump to the surface, and instead to have something what you're calling detachment. I mean, is that how you would describe it?
Detachment is being rational, but also untethering from that other person's expectations and emotions, right? I do cord cutting rituals two or
Okay.
three times a year to help people learn that visualization. The detachment is, to be really blunt, no longer trying to control the outcome, right? It's no
Awesome.
longer suffering from the delusion that you can influence that other person because people
Okay.
get very stuck there, right?
That's a good,
Recognizing,
thank you. Yeah, that's a good
yes,
clarification. Thank you.
yeah,
The problem was they thought they could control some aspect of the outcome, and
yes,
and you can't. So coming to that painful realization, right? Because you
yeah.
have to abandon, you kind of lose something at that point, right?
There's a grief process. There's a
Yeah.
grief process that comes with that realization that the other person isn't going to change even for you,
Like he's
right?
never going to change. We're never going to have the dream marriage. He's always going to be probably like this. And this is my life. This is the
Yes,
reality of my life. And there might be
yes.
other great things on the horizon, but it's not that, right? You have to let go of that. And I can imagine, wow, that would be a lot of crying on my part.
It's 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 really hard. Yeah. We hold really tightly to our beliefs and delusions. And so if you have a narcissistic partner, they have fed all of the things that
Oh
that
yeah,
they
they know the
think you
buttons. They
want,
know the buttons.
right? They have told you everything that you want to hear and they make promises. So that is, part of the manipulation that draws you in. And what people grieve isn't what they actually had, it's what they thought they were going to have.
Yeah. I'm going to tell a quick story. One of the social workers I know, she worked in domestic abuse for about 10 years.
Yes.
And she said in some ways it was very rewarding, but it was also very frustrating because the women often usually went back. So I said, why did they go back? Is it the money? Like, is it a financial stress or something? And she said, oh no, that's not what it is. She said, and I was surprised. She said the guy knows the buttons to push, and it's always
Yes.
something like a little bit of affection or attention. And he knows what her thing is to hook her in, like the flowers or the physical affection or the right words. So he gives her that little bit of bait, I guess I would call it, and he hooks her in like a fish. Like it's so, oh, I was surprised because I thought it would be more of a financial thing, but it wasn't. But that,
It can be a financial thing.
yeah,
It often is the end result of that intermittent reinforcement, right?
Yeah,
And they've
100%.
already on a daily basis are reeled in by someone so they can be cast back out again. And that's a very difficult pattern to break, right? It's a reward system, and
Yeah.
um, narcissists can be very compelling when they want something. I have a former friend who's highly narcissistic, and she was being like a really terrible person. And the two of us are driving somewhere, and she looked me straight in the eye and said, "I really am trying to be a better person."
Okay.
Right?
What do you think about that?
I think she was trying to get me to believe that. Hmm. There was no
What?
way she was trying to be a better person. She
Okay.
just wanted me to believe that.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. So you
Hmm.
didn't see any actual evidence in her behavior that she was doing that.
Yes.
All right. Okay, well, I hope you've moved on from her. So,
Yes.
I like that you said you used visualization in your practice. I think that's a really powerful therapeutic tool. Can you talk a little bit about that? The
Sure, there are a number of different versions of this. So there are times when I used something called EMDR, eye movement
Mhm.
desensitization and reprocessing, and I use an attachment informed way of doing that. And it involves giving people resources where they use visualization. So that can be a white light of protection, that can be visualizing that you have spiritual guides or, supportive characters around you. I have the Justice League is what I say. I also use cord cutting ritual or even a visualization. I worked with someone the other day where I said, just imagine your ex, is leaving the earth and he's out in the atmosphere. And she said, "Can I blow him up?" And I said, "Sure, blow him up."
Yeah,
Yes.
visualize. It's okay in your imagination, not in real life, not in actual life. But yeah, like I find visualizing things that I would never do in real life sometimes very empowering. Um, and I think when I was younger, I would have felt guilty even for having those thoughts. But I'm like, no, that's part of my, I guess it's your shadow, right? I'm like,
Yes.
no, my shadow is good. Like, I don't, not that you, it's not good to act those things out, but to know they're present in you as a force.
If you are operating with someone, or if you're dealing with someone who's operating purely from shadow self or a protector part or a perpetrator part, right? That part of their psyche, you've got to fight fire with fire a little bit there, right? So that's kind of what we need to do. And most of us are very good at visualizing the worst case scenario. This is about visualizing the best case scenario.
I imagine you spend a lot of time teaching people to stand up for themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I teach you just saw me do it, postural awareness, right? Straight back, alignment between the top of the head and the sit bones, strong back, open heart,
Okay.
right?
Heart wide open. Yeah.
Heart wide open. Yeah.
So I'm going to tell people now how to get the book. If you would like to be the winner of the free book, please email me at my website, www.howcaniknowmybrain.com, and tell me who is the religious world leader in Tibet. It's going to be an easy question. Who is the religious world leader from Tibet that we talked about in our interview? So email me the name of that person at www.howcaniknowmybrain.com. The first person who does that, I will get your mailing address and I will mail you a free book. And you can read about Heart Wide Open. Okay, that's done. That's marketing, Stacey. Okay, so you said another goal of therapy for narcissistic wounding is to recover vital aspects of yourself that you hid to survive. And I found that really moving, actually. Can you talk about recovering vital aspects of yourself that you hid to survive?
One of the most common things people start hiding is their creativity.
Oh,
Okay, so people who may have been or who are rather musicians, artists, if you look at I can't give away too much, but if you look at the cover art on my book, that tells that story a little bit, about a beautiful artist who had to hide her gifts. Um, the the natural curiosity, maybe someone is a brilliant writer, maybe they're a really good cook, right? But these gifts start being attacked by a parent or a friend or a partner, right? I give this example in the book where I have a fashionista archetype. I love fashion, right? Maybe not now because I've got my track pants on, but it's Saturday. But there have been people throughout my life who have attacked me for that, right? Who
Mm.
have, made sideways comments about what I was wearing. I mean, I know where it comes from, but that's another example of that, from
Can
my
I
own
say
lived
can I
experience.
say where I think it comes from? Envy.
Oh,
This is the
yeah.
word that's coming from. Envy, envy, envy. It's just jumping up in my head so huge. Because when you're being creative, you're expressing your curiosity, your unique self, your pure joy, and they don't ever do that in their own life, and nothing can make them more envious and spiteful and hateful. And that's why is that on you? I don't know. They can start doing that in their own life. But rather than doing that, they get the jollies and the reinforcement out of being abusive, right? And
Yes.
hurting you. I mean, they could go for this other joy of creativity, but that takes work and courage. It takes courage more than work. It takes a leap of faith. But it's easier when you're there just to be a punching bag. So it's a
Yes.
real weakness. It's a weak strategy for a weak person who doesn't have the courage to do the thing they actually should be doing.
Yes.
That breaks my heart that you say that the thing they hide the most is their creativity.
It's
Oh,
it's the thing I hear the most. Yeah. I have never, like, all of my clients have an aesthetic gift, right? And we learned this during COVID when we got to see everyone's homes, right? But they love design, decor, color, texture. Empaths need to make the world around them a better place, not like aesthetically being the jumping off point for that, right?
but it's part of it.
That is a huge part of it. And it is something that I will work with early on to talk about, what are your gifts and interests and what brings you joy, right? And often it will be, that need to make a space beautiful, right? And there is something about that natural capacity for joy and creativity and beauty and even kindness that is triggering for narcissists. I think I
Mm-hmm.
have on my YouTube channel, I've done a talk about narcissists and kindness because it's important for people to understand that they do not experience kindness the way the rest of us do. But yeah, back to your original question, it is those natural gifts that start to be repressed and repressed and repressed, right?
So is I guess one of the goals of the therapy is to bring out those natural gifts.
Yes. Yes, it brings balance, it brings homeostasis, it's empowering, it brings people back into their true nature, their authentic selves. Yeah.
One of the chapters in your book is about values. I'm just looking for the title of it. Values as an anchor into your personal power. I like the word power. So, um, mm, I'm just thinking there's a Bible verse about your anchor being in your heart. I can't remember the exact verse right now. But how do your values bring you into your personal power?
So when I had coaching myself for narcissistic wounding, it was the one thing I took out of that coaching experience that made any kind of sense or had any kind of resonance. Most of us know what we value. It's core, right?
Okay.
Even if you have to pull it out a little bit. And that's why I have all the words, right? All of the values listed so people can look at them.
Do people
So
know,
for
Stacey? I don't know if they do, but okay, thank you for the list.
I think most,
Okay.
and if you don't, it's there for you, right?
Can I just read some of the words off the list?
Yeah.
So you have a list of values here that people can reflect on. So I'm going to read a bunch. Honesty, intelligence, altruism, frugality, determination, nature, collaboration, transparency, religion, community, bravery, energy. I think this is a good use of our time. Ritual, communication, sovereignty, courage, truth, generosity, humor, strength, advocacy, silence, openness, education. That's about 40% of them. So you've got this extensive list of values. Why do you think it's important that people are aware of their values and reflect on their values? And what does that have to do with healing?
Because it's something that's been doubted and questioned for them.
Mm,
It's I think that there's a correlation between what's important to us and what our inner thought process is as well, right? So for example, if we value fairness, we're in this relationship with someone who's never fair. Let's anchor back into what you know to be true, right? If we value kindness, right? Is it important that we be treated with kindness? If we value openness, is it important that someone be, or honesty even, is it important that someone be honest with us? Right? So it gives us this way of anchoring into what we know to be true for ourselves rather than hyper focusing on the behavior of another person.
yeah, and if we say we picked three values that were most important and see things through that lens, then we can very quickly decide if they're treating us the way we would like to be treated or not, instead of getting caught up in the little details of it, or hooked into their manipulation and their reinforcements and rewards and things. If you had to pick three values, what value, I know there's more, okay, but I'm simplifying it. Which three values to you are the most important?
Kindness,
Kindness?
yes.
I would pick that too. Okay.
Courage, and peace or inner peace.
Kindness, courage, and inner peace. Okay. So I'm going to ask everyone in the audience just to think for a minute about what your three are, and that you would just take that with you and 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 use that in your everyday life. What are your most important three values? And of course, add more, change them as you like, but I think it's important to think about that. I often think about balance as an important one.
There. Yeah.
Balance and honesty. Yeah. Humor maybe is one.
Humor.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a fun exercise to do. Um, so your book, you talked about reclaiming your body. Can you tell me about that? Why that is important? Why you included that in your book?
Yes. Most people, particularly if they've had a toxic or narcissistic parent, has experienced a real violation of the sovereignty of their body, right? Um, and their body has been something the other person has focused on. Are they too tall, too short, too thin, too fat, too there's a lot of weird body hang-ups with people who are narcissistic. I mean, I think that it's a collective social plague, if I'm being totally honest. Um, but
So are you
it,
finding that your clients, their say it was a parent, as for example,
yes,
their parent criticize like are you saying their parent like I'm thinking of more extreme examples would be like physical abuse or like sexual
yes,
abuse, but you're also talking about like criticism of them physically. Is that what you're talking
yes.
about?
There's a real spectrum of that violation, right? And I
Yeah.
mentioned that in the book of, a narcissistic parent looking at you, casting their gaze on you, determining, if you're
Judgment.
representing them okay, or they live vicariously through your body at one end, and then, the complete boundary violation of that body being used for power and sexual gratification. So it exists on that spectrum. And I've heard all of it from
I bet.
the most benign to the worst possible scenario. Um,
I guess I hadn't thought of it as the more mild end of the spectrum. Like, I think I'm aware of sexual abuse and physical abuse, like in the community, but I hadn't thought of the effect of just that judgmental eye always falling on you and little comments about maybe your weight um, uh, or some. Yeah, I think that maybe that would fall more on women. I'm not sure, but or just your clothes, like you're saying, your hair. And that's a way of being mean to someone if you're not actually going to hit them, but you're just always saying, oh, you need to lose weight. Or do you have clients when that's the issue?
Yeah, and it's it is a way of asserting dominance. I didn't
Oh
bring that
yeah.
word up earlier. It's a way that someone asserts dominance within a relationship. So whether it's a parent focusing on your body or it's a partner focusing on your body, it's a way that they
Mm,
get an upper hand by making you question yourself or feel bad about yourself. It really is about social dominance. Can't believe that's the first time I used that word. However,
oh, okay. And I know
it's
like some people, I saw someone on TV once and the husband always commented on what the wife ate. Or are you
yes,
gonna eat, or are you gonna eat that? You shouldn't eat that. Or you're eating that. Why? Did you really need 2 cans of Coke? Like just constant monitoring of their eating. And I guess some
yes.
parents do that to their children as well.
Yes, I have told the story for years about how my mom would put food on my plate
Oh,
and then say, "You look like you've really put on the beef," right? Like
yeah.
um that kind of thing. And it's a boundary violation, right? Talking about someone's body, what they're eating, or their weight is a boundary violation. So part of the recovery is in loving your body, loving the skin you're in, loving your natural strength, loving your natural attributes, not being vulnerable to what other people say or do or think.
Okay. So if someone's watching this now and they feel they've been in a relationship with someone narcissistic, like a parent or a sibling, there's certainly sibling abuse, a parent or a sibling, grandparent, a spouse. I mean, what would you say to them if you could say a few things to them about what they should do or what you would like them to know?
I think the first and most important one is very trauma informed, and that is to say that it isn't their fault.
It's not your
Someone
fault.
else's behavior is never your fault. It isn't because of you. The other thing to say is that, you have something beautiful and important and valid to contribute to the world and to be on that path. And then to know that you have a divine right to have people in your life who really honor you, witness you, see you, love and care about you. There's
Yeah.
a lot of other things I could say, but that's what I will
Yeah.
say.
I would say this is what I would say to them. There is another world than the world
Yes,
you've lived
I
in.
love that.
There is another world than the world you have lived in. That's what I would say. So find your way there. So, can you tell everybody a little bit about what your website is and what social
Sure.
media you have and where they can get the book?
Sure. So anything that you are interested in, you can find from the website, which is www.staceysanderson.ca. So really simple and easy. The links are there to the YouTube channel, to other podcast guest spots, to articles, to the book. It's all there. But I am on YouTube at the Empathic Therapist Guide to Narcissism, and my socials are called Inquire Within.
Okay.
And I get there from time to time, but there is a lot of content on there. And I also have a newsletter that takes people to registration for the free workshops I run every month. So I run a free workshop once a month on a variety of different topics, but that definitely includes the cord cutting rituals. And this upcoming one in March is going to be on spiritual narcissism.
Stacey, you have everything. You have everything. You should. Oh, I'm gonna go viral soon, so we'll be big. Don't worry about it. I was gonna say you should. I was gonna say you should be on Oprah. You will be. Don't worry about it.
I'll hold your hand.
So, thank you for being my guest today. I'm going to put all your information in the description below so people can get to your stuff. And I think that your work helps a lot of people. This is a major issue in society, recovering from violations, from abuse, whether it's physical, sexual, or the more subtle and insidious emotional stuff that really messes with your head and is hard to get over because it's more subtle, but it's always there messing you up. So it's harder to get over that sometimes. And therapy is there now to help people. We're very lucky to live in the times we live in. So
Yes.
Stacey is taking clients. So if you're interested in seeing her, do you see people online? You must.
I probably see 60% of my clients online and
Okay.
40% in office. Yeah.
So if you're looking for an experienced therapist, Stacey is taking clients right now, and her information is down below. And I want to say to everybody, know your brain for a bountiful life.
Yes.
And
Thank you so much, Faith.
okay, and thank you.